I used to believe that Area 51 was the epicenter of the unknown, the crown jewel of government secrecy. Every whispered rumor, every grainy UFO video, every classified leak seemed to trace back to that isolated patch of desert in Nevada. For years, I combed through satellite images, decrypted whistleblower testimonies, and even made a few nighttime excursions as close as I could get to the perimeter without being arrested. I thought I was chasing the truth. I was wrong. My name is Elijah Monroe, 37 years old, former military intelligence analyst, now living off the grid somewhere in the Northern Hemisphere. If you're hearing this, it means they haven't silenced me yet. And if you care about the future of humanity, you'll want to listen until the very end. It started 7 months ago with an encrypted file. I was sorting through a batch of intercepted transmissions routed through defunct military satellites. Normally, these were just static. Noise, echoes from old comms systems bouncing around the ionosphere. But one transmission caught my attention. Not because of what it said, but because of how it was encoded. A pattern. Fibonacci sequences nested inside prime number strings. The signature matched a format I hadn't seen since my time at DARPA, and even then, it had been reserved for the highest tier of Black Ops communication. It took me 4 days to decrypt it. The message wasn't long, just coordinates, a timestamp, and a sentence in Spanish that translated to, "The mirrors in Nevada are for the fools. The eye is in the south." The south. At first, I assumed it was a reference to some hidden facility in Mexico, or maybe deep in the Amazon rainforest. But when I plugged the coordinates into a private geospatial mapping system, the point landed in a barren, wind-scoured region at the southern tip of Argentina, deep Patagonia, not far from the glacial cliffs of Seno Ultima Esperanza. And then the timestamp. It wasn't a date in the future. It was a historical marker, March 29th, 1944. That was the real hook. Because March 29th, 1944 was the date a Nazi U-boat, U-977, reportedly vanished without a trace during its voyage from Europe. According to official records, the vessel surrendered months later in Argentina. But several crew members had disappeared en route. Theories had always swirled around that incident. Lost documents, unauthorized landings, but now it felt like a breadcrumb. I had to follow it. It took me 2 weeks to arrange the trip. I used false identities, bounced across multiple borders, paid cash wherever possible. I claimed to be an environmental researcher with a fascination for glacial retreat patterns. That got me through customs without incident. From the port city of Punta Arenas, I chartered a bush pilot named Marcos. Weather-beaten, quiet, kept to himself. The kind of man who didn't ask questions as long as you paid in advance. We flew east, then south, over jagged fjords, icy plains, and twisted rock formations that looked more alien than terrestrial. Eventually, the terrain flattened into a vast expanse of tundra, crisscrossed by ancient ice scars. That's when I saw it. The line. Not natural, not geological. A perfect circle carved into the earth, almost 10 miles in diameter. Covered in frost and moss, but still visibly distinct. And at the center of the circle, something metallic. A dome. Half submerged. Dull gray. The color of old aircraft fuselage. It looked abandoned, but I could see faint heat signatures bleeding off its surface even from the air. Marcos didn't want to land. "This place isn't on any map," he muttered. "And I've flown this region for 20 years. I paid him double, then triple. He finally set the plane down half a mile from the structure. I told him I'd only be an hour. I never saw him again. The snow around the dome was strangely untouched. No footprints, no signs of life. Yet I felt watched from the moment I stepped onto that ground. As I approached the structure, I realized there were no seams, no visible entry points, no antennae, just a smooth surface that curved perfectly into the earth like the top of an eye looking up at the sky. I walked around it once, then twice. That's when the humming started. Low frequency, like the vibration of a tuning fork pressed against your skull. It made my teeth ache. And then the surface shifted. Not opened, shifted. As if the material wasn't metal but something that mimicked perception, it unfolded into itself, revealing a stairway that spiraled downward in complete silence. I didn't hesitate. I should have. The air inside was warm, too warm, like a spring evening despite the snow outside. The stairway was lit by small orbs embedded in the walls, glowing blue with no visible power source. As I descended, I counted my steps. 32, 68, 105, still going down. The curvature of the stairwell began to bend unnaturally, like I was descending into a spiral that didn't obey standard geometry. Finally, I emerged into a chamber. Spherical, maybe 200 feet in diameter. The walls pulsed softly, like the chamber was breathing, and in the center stood a structure, not a machine, not an altar, something in between. It was organic in shape, but mechanical in detail. Copper-like veins traced across its surface, converging into a node suspended in mid-air by nothing but invisible force. I approached, and the moment I stepped into the inner circle of the room, the air changed. Denser, electric, and then it spoke. Not in words, in memory. It flooded my mind with images, not dreams, not hallucinations, memories that were not mine, of civilizations rising and falling, of stars forming, collapsing, of entities that weren't bound to physical form, entities that had been watching, studying, cataloging. Earth wasn't their first attempt. It wasn't even their most successful. And Area 51, Groom Lake, the hangars and labs in the Nevada desert, just theater, sleight of hand, distraction. Because the real observatory, the real point of contact, was beneath the ice and rock of Patagonia, hidden in a place so remote, so desolate, no one would think to look. Until now. I should have run, but I stayed. And that was the third mistake I made that day. I don't remember how long I stood there. The memories, they didn't just show themselves, they folded into mine. I couldn't tell where my life ended and theirs began. The entities, whatever they were, didn't speak through sound. They encoded thoughts into sensation, emotion, smell, touch. They could make you feel the heat of a dying sun, the grief of an extinct species, the loneliness of empty galaxies, all in a fraction of a second. And then they showed me Earth. Not the way we see it, not as a blue marble on a black canvas, but as a frequency, a pulse. They called it Node 42. Not a name, a designation. Earth wasn't home. It was an experiment. We were an experiment. I staggered backward, breath catching in my throat. The images wouldn't stop. Children playing in desert sands that no longer exist. Oceans boiling under a foreign sun. Machines dreaming in languages I didn't recognize. The node, this place, was broadcasting a history not recorded in any human database. A history that spanned billions of years and wasn't meant for us. But I wasn't supposed to see it. I wasn't invited. And that's when the alarm started. Not loud, not blaring, just a shift. A change in the chamber's rhythm. The pulses in the walls, steady and slow, began to speed up. Faster, brighter. The structure at the center flickered like it was searching for something. Or someone. The temperature dropped. Instantly. My breath clouded in the air, and the smooth floor beneath my boots started to ripple, like something beneath it had stirred awake. I turned to run, but the stairway was gone. Not hidden. Gone. The opening through which I had entered had sealed behind me, replaced by seamless wall. Panic kicked in. I banged on the surface with both fists. No give, not even an echo, as if the chamber was swallowing all sound. I took a step back, trying to calm my breathing. That's when I noticed the wall wasn't just a wall. It was reflecting me, but not in the way a mirror should. My reflection didn't move when I did. It stood still, eyes locked onto mine. Then slowly it smiled. I didn't. Its lips moved, shaping a sentence I couldn't hear, but I understood the words. You're not the first. I stumbled away from it, back toward the center of the room. But now the node was different. The copper veins were spreading, creeping along the walls, growing like vines. They pulsed with light in a rhythm I didn't recognize at first, until I did. It was Morse code. I hadn't used Morse since my field days, but instinct kicked in. The pulses repeated, "Intrusion detected. Query. Origin. Query. Permission." I didn't respond. How could I? Another pulse. "Unauthorized presence. Subject Adam 12. Adam 12. The name meant nothing to me. Then the floor beneath me dropped. Not physically, visually. The chamber peeled away, like layers of a 3D model collapsing, and I was standing somewhere else. Same body, same consciousness, but now in a metal corridor bathed in pale red light. I wasn't dreaming. I wasn't hallucinating. This was real. Somehow, I turned around, heart pounding, and saw it. A row of glass tubes lining the corridor. Maybe a dozen, maybe more. Inside each one, a figure. Humanoid. Asleep. Or preserved. The tubes were filled with a translucent gel. The bodies within had no hair. Pale skin. Smooth features. Like human prototypes sculpted without detail. One of them floated upright, head tilted slightly, as if aware of my presence. And behind me, footsteps. I spun, fists clenched. A man stood there, late 40s, military cut, black fatigues, no insignia, no name tag. "Elijah Monroe," he said. Calm, controlled. I nodded slowly. "Who the hell are you?" He didn't answer. Just looked me over, then gestured down the corridor. "This way." I hesitated. He raised an eyebrow. "You came this far to find answers. You want the truth? Or do you want the fantasy?" I followed. We passed more tubes, more bodies. Some were humanoid. Others weren't. One looked insectoid, its limbs too long, torso segmented. Another was quadrupedal, with a skull twice the size of mine and eyes that seemed to follow us as we walked. None of them were breathing. None of them were dead. "They're in stasis," the man said, answering my unspoken question. "Subjects from failed nodes." I stopped. "Failed?" He turned to me. "Earth wasn't the first. The others, nodes 1 through 41, they were terminated." Terminated how? Variables couldn't be controlled. Environmental collapse, self-annihilation, external contamination. And we're Node 42. He opened a door at the end of the corridor. Inside was a chamber, smaller than the first. Dark walls lined with machinery. A single chair in the center, like a cockpit ripped from a spacecraft. "This facility wasn't built by humans," he said. "But humans manage it now." I stared at him. He continued. Area 51 was a feint, a stage play. While the world watched the Nevada desert, the real observatory operated here, beneath layers of ice and geopolitical indifference. I stepped toward the chair. "What is this place?" "The last relay," he said. "A listening post, a memory vault, a test. Call it what you want. But it's been watching Earth for longer than Earth has existed. The entities that made it, they don't live in our dimension. They exist in probabilities, in quantum echoes. They built thousands of these vaults across galaxies. Most are dormant. A few are active. And this one?" He looked at me. "This one is waking up. The man never told me his name. Not once. Even as we sat in the control chamber, me pacing in circles, him calm as a statue, he never offered anything beyond the facts. Like names didn't matter anymore, like identity was an obsolete concept inside this place. "What do you mean it's waking up?" I finally asked. He didn't look at me when he answered, just stared at the dark panel across from the chair. "The relay's been in dormant mode for over 13,000 years, but recently there's been activity. Small at first, then accelerating. Patterns in the background radiation, seismic pulses beneath the South Pole, a signal embedded in the cosmic microwave background, everything pointing to the same conclusion." He turned to me. "It's preparing to transmit." "To transmit what?" He tapped the side of his head. "Everything." I sat down, heart pounding. "You're telling me this place is some kind of cosmic hard drive? For who?" He exhaled slowly, like he'd been waiting for that question. "For the originators, the architects, call them what you want. No one knows where they came from, or when, but they seeded the universe with these vaults, each one designed to gather data on consciousness, evolution, environmental resilience. Every node, a planet, a species, a culture, is a case study, a simulation in slow motion. And Earth is just another entry. Yes, then why now? Why not 1,000 years ago, or 1,000 years from now? Because, he said, walking toward the wall, Node 42 has reached its tipping point. All relays activate when a subject civilization passes a specific threshold. What threshold? He looked me dead in the eye. When a species becomes aware that it is being watched. I froze. He continued. The Webb telescope, deep field data, artificial alignments, geometric anomalies in distant clusters. It wasn't just curiosity, it was recognition. We looked too far, and something looked back. I swallowed. And what happens after the transmission? He didn't answer. Instead, the walls of the chamber came alive, not glowing, not humming, just shifting. The darkness rippled like a pool of ink being disturbed. Symbols appeared, etched in light, spiraling around the room like constellations reorganizing. And in the center of the panel, a countdown. Hours, minutes, seconds. This is why you were called here, the man said. I wasn't called. I followed a message. He nodded. Planted decades ago, a breadcrumb trail, designed to attract minds capable of breaking the pattern. Not everyone sees the anomaly. Fewer still follow it, but some do. And when they do, they get brought here. I stood slowly. Brought. You think you found this place by accident? No one told me. You're not the first, Monroe. I stared at him. Then where are the others? He looked away. A silence passed between us. Thick, heavy. I've been here for 11 years, he said. Longer than anyone before me. Most don't make it more than a week. The relay shows them too much. Forces them to see the universe the way it sees us. And that kind of perspective breaks people. You're still here. I was born in a facility that doesn't exist. Trained for programs that don't officially operate. I've seen things, classified, buried, erased, that would make most men pray for madness. He looked at me again, and I'm barely holding it together. The countdown ticked. 12 hours, 14 minutes, and 43 seconds. What happens when it hits zero? The relay transmits. To where? We don't know. We can't trace the path. It disappears the moment it leaves the relay's core. Not even quantum entanglement can track it. And after the transmission? He was silent. Tell me. The node is evaluated. I narrowed my eyes. Evaluated? He stepped closer, voice lower now. Some nodes are preserved, catalogued, archived, their patterns incorporated into the architect's library, and the others? Purged. The word hit like a bullet. Purged how? I asked. We don't know. The records don't say. But none of the failed nodes show signs of life. Not microbial, not geological, nothing. Like they were rewritten. I backed away from the panel. And you've known this for 11 years? He nodded. Then why not destroy the relay? Because it's not possible. We've tried. The walls aren't material. They're dimensional constructs. Explosives don't work. Energy pulses are absorbed. Even trying to disrupt the countdown just resets it. So we're just waiting. He nodded. Unless you trigger the alternative. My pulse quickened. Alternative? The relay doesn't just observe, it also interfaces. He pointed to the chair. That's not a seat, it's a conduit. A conduit for what? He turned to me, and for the first time his voice carried fear. For initiation. I stared at the chair. It wasn't mechanical. Not exactly. Its surface shimmered slightly, like it was both solid and fluid. Copper veins pulsed faintly, matching the rhythm of the countdown. And something inside it, deep inside, was moving. Why would anyone sit in that? Because the relay responds to recognition. If a subject enters the conduit and survives the interface, it can send a different message. What kind of message? One that redefines the node's status. Reclassifies it as aware, conscious, collaborative. I narrowed my eyes. You're saying it gives Earth a second chance. I'm saying it gives Earth a voice. And if no one enters it? He looked at the countdown. Then the architects make their decision based on what we've already become. The room fell into silence. I stood there, staring at the chair, heart racing, mind spinning. 12 hours, 11 now, and I had to choose between silence or communion. I didn't sleep. I didn't move. For 6 hours I stood there, eyes locked on the chair, watching it pulse, listening to the countdown. I kept trying to convince myself I had a choice, that I could turn back, that I could climb out of this subterranean vault, hike to the ridge, find a signal, call someone, warn them, the military, the UN, anyone. But I knew better. I had followed the trail too far, seen too much. Whatever this relay was, whatever waited on the other side of that countdown, I was already part of it. And the longer I stared at the conduit, the more I realized something disturbing. It was looking back. The structure wasn't just humming. It was adapting, reading me, adjusting its pulse to match mine. I started hearing things. At first, just a high-pitched ring in the base of my skull, but then words. Not in English, not in any human language, but I understood them, like remembering a dream in a language you never studied. Initiate. I turned to the man, the sentinel who had lived here, managed this place for 11 years. He hadn't spoken in hours. He was sitting against the far wall, eyes closed, breathing shallow. "They're inside the chair," he said without opening his eyes. "Who?" "The fragments. Memory echoes from other nodes, from other interfaces. Some of them didn't survive, but parts of them stayed." My chest tightened. "You're saying it stores consciousness?" He nodded slowly. "Each subject becomes part of the relay, adds to its perspective. That's why the chair is selective. It doesn't want volunteers, it wants truth." I looked at him. "Have you ever sat in it?" A long pause. "No." "Why not?" He opened his eyes. "Because I know what I'd find." "What's that?" He didn't answer, just stared at me. A look not of fear, but of resignation. The expression of someone who had seen the storm coming and decided to stay in its path. I looked back to the chair. The pulse had changed again. Faster now, like a heartbeat. Urgent, I stepped toward it. My legs felt heavier with every step, like the gravity in that room was increasing, like the relay was testing me, calculating my intent. When I reached the base, I hesitated. I turned to the sentinel one last time. "What if I fail?" He didn't speak. The chair moved, it adjusted, formed to my shape, not just physically but mentally. I could feel it, somehow, aligning with the exact pattern of my thoughts. It didn't just want me to sit, it wanted me to surrender. And so I did. The moment I made contact, everything changed. Not around me, inside me. There was no blinding light, no dramatic transformation, just silence, a void, and then the entire room shattered. I was no longer in the relay, I wasn't in the earth, I wasn't anywhere. Instead, I was floating, if you can even call it that, inside a massive lattice of light, spanning infinite directions, a web, no beginning, no center, just pulsing nodes connected by glowing filaments. And as I looked closer, I realized what I was seeing. Consciousness. Each node pulsed with emotion, memory, identity, and somewhere in that lattice was Earth, a single blue pulse. But it was flickering, fading. I was pulled through the lattice, past other pulses, other civilizations. Some were gone, dark, extinguished. Others still glowed faintly, active, but dormant. Then I passed something else, a void. Not absence, consumption, a dead zone in the lattice, not just empty, but devoured. Whatever had existed there had been erased, not killed, removed from the equation. I felt a deep fear ripple through the lattice. The other nodes responded, dimmed themselves slightly, like a forest quieting when a predator enters. And then came the voice. Not from outside, from everywhere. "You are late." It wasn't an accusation. It was a measurement. "You seek to intervene." I tried to speak, but I had no mouth, no body, no breath. "You will be tested." The lattice around me bent inward, forming a sphere. The colors changed, blue, gold, violet. And then I was back, but not in the relay. I was standing in my childhood bedroom, exactly as I remembered it. Posters on the wall, books on the desk, the smell of rain outside the window, and sitting on my bed was me, at 8 years old. The boy looked up, smiled, and then spoke. What would you sacrifice to save a species that doesn't know it needs saving? I stared at him. What is this? The boy tilted his head. Evaluation. Not of your knowledge, but of your identity. Of your willingness to burn away what you are to preserve what may yet become. The room began to fade. The ceiling peeled away into stars. The floor dissolved into clouds. I was standing on nothing, surrounded by everything. You are the voice, the child said. But will you be the echo? And then, pain. Not physical, existential. Like my entire being was being unraveled and rewoven in real time. Every memory I had, every lie I told, every moment I regretted, I lived them again, but this time, through someone else's eyes. The people I hurt, the ones I failed, the silence I kept when I should have spoken. It wasn't a test of virtue, it was a test of perspective. And when it ended, I was changed. The lattice returned. The voice spoke again. Node 42. A pause. Conduit accepted. Then silence. Then light. I opened my eyes with a gasp. The relay chamber was exactly as I had left it. The walls still pulsed with low light. The countdown had stopped. Frozen at 6 minutes, 24 seconds. But something had changed. The air. It was denser. Still breathable but charged. Like static just before a lightning strike. And then I realized I wasn't alone. The man, the sentinel, was no longer against the wall. He was standing across from me, but he looked different. His eyes weren't the same. The grey in his hair was gone. His posture was straighter, like something inside him had been restored or replaced. I watched the whole thing, he said. His voice was his, but something in it had shifted. More layered, more precise. They let you in. I stood slowly from the chair. My legs were weak, but functional. What happened? He walked toward the center of the room, his gaze fixed on the panel where the countdown had stopped. They evaluated you. The architects. You weren't just an observer anymore. You became part of the process. The lattice absorbed you, and then responded. To what? To your decision. I shook my head. I didn't make a decision. Yes, he said. You did. He tapped the panel with the back of his hand. The countdown paused. That's never happened before. Not since this relay activated. What does that mean? That for the first time in the history of this node, Earth has a pending outcome. I moved toward him. You said nodes were either archived or purged. What does pending mean? He looked at me, and I knew he was struggling with the same question. We don't know. There's no record of this. The lattice wasn't built for ambiguity. The relay chair dimmed behind me. Its pulsing veins settled into a steady rhythm, no longer demanding, no longer beckoning. It had accepted me, and that scared me more than rejection ever could. The man moved to the edge of the chamber, pressing his hand against the wall. A section of the surface shimmered and pulled away, revealing a narrow hallway I hadn't seen before. We have to go, he said. Where? There's another level. I followed. We walked in silence, the corridor curving gradually as it descended deeper into the earth, or whatever dimension the relay occupied. The walls no longer looked metallic. They were glass-like, translucent, showing layers of glowing circuitry beneath their surface. I saw patterns moving, symbols I recognized from the lattice. They weren't random. They were language, or logic. I couldn't tell anymore. The corridor ended at a wide platform. Below us was the core. It was the size of a stadium. Suspended in the air, held in place by nothing I could see, was a sphere. Black, seamless, perfect. Its surface wasn't reflective, but it shifted as we looked at it. Not in color or form, but in interpretation. I saw it as a sphere. The man beside me saw something else. It's the memory archive, he said. The relay stores everything here. Everything? He nodded. Not just from Earth, from all active nodes, every moment of consciousness, every fragment of civilization, every anomaly. It's all encoded here. I stepped closer to the edge. I'm not supposed to see this. He didn't answer, because he knew I was right. The relay wasn't built for us. It tolerated our presence, maybe even needed it, but it didn't welcome it. This place wasn't part of human history. It was something older, something external. The man gestured to a console embedded into the platform. "This is where you complete the process." I hesitated. "Complete what?" "You interfaced. You passed evaluation, but the relay still needs something from you." "What?" "Declaration." The word hit with weight. "I don't know what I'd even say," I admitted. He pointed to the console. "It's not verbal, it's encoded." I approached. The console lit up as I neared. A circle of light expanded outward, revealing a flat surface with concentric rings, each inscribed with moving text in a script I had never learned, but somehow understood. It was waiting for my touch. "What happens if I don't?" The man's expression darkened. "Then the countdown resumes, and the default protocol is restored." "And default means erasure." I stood over the console for a long time. I thought of Earth, of the people I knew, of the billions of lives still unaware that their existence was part of something immeasurably vast and impersonal. I thought about our failures, our wars, our ignorance, and yet I also thought about music, about stories, about courage, about sacrifice. Flawed as we were, humanity was still growing, still learning, still worth saving. I placed my hand on the console. The surface accepted me instantly. A beam of light extended from the platform into the core, connecting my declaration to the archive. I didn't speak, I didn't write, I just thought, and the relay did the rest. It was done in 5 seconds. The beam retracted. The console dimmed. The man exhaled slowly. "Now we wait." I turned to him. "For how long?" He didn't answer. Because he didn't know. We waited 12 hours. That was the first thing that told me the system wasn't following its own rules anymore. The relay had always operated on precision. Every transmission, every interface, every sequence ran on strict protocol. Now there was silence. No countdown, no alert. Just the echo of what I had sent into the archive. My thoughts, converted, translated, absorbed, were now part of something far greater than I could understand. And the relay was thinking, or calculating, or both. The man, my only companion, paced the edge of the platform like a caged animal. I could see it in his eyes. Something was unraveling. Not in the relay. In him. "You've seen something," I said. He didn't look at me. I pressed again. "Back when I was inside the interface. While I was under, you were watching." His jaw tightened. "I didn't see your experience," he said. "No one can. That process is private. Direct." "Then what?" He stopped pacing. The relay changed. I waited. He continued. "The core blinked. Once. It's never done that. Not in the entire time I've been here." "What does it mean?" He looked at me with something close to reverence and fear. "It means the system acknowledged you." And then it happened. Without warning, the platform vibrated. A low, deep tone resonated from the walls. Not loud, but powerful. Like a bell ringing from inside the planet. The core rotated slowly, its surface shimmering, distorting the space around it. Lines of light extended from the sphere, 12 in total, shooting outward in perfect geometric formation, each striking a section of the platform around us. As they connected, the space between them began to shift. A grid formed in mid-air, hovering, rotating, growing. "What is that?" I asked. He didn't answer. He was already moving. Toward the grid. I followed. As we approached, the light from the grid collapsed inward, forming a single point, then expanded outward into an image. A face, but not human. At first glance, it seemed like a person, eyes, mouth, a structure that suggested familiarity. But the longer I looked, the more I realized it was a mimic, a construction of something trying to look familiar to me, to us. Its eyes locked onto mine, and then it spoke, not through sound, through comprehension. "You have interfered." The words struck my mind directly, bypassing language. "You altered the sequence, corrupted evaluation." I stepped forward. I submitted a declaration. That was part of the process. The face shifted, tilting, considering. There was no directive for submission from this node. The man beside me whispered, "This wasn't supposed to be possible." I ignored him. Then the system was incomplete. The face leaned in closer. Or maybe it just gave that impression. I felt it, not physically but mentally, scanning me again. Not my memories, not my thoughts, my intent. Node 42 has diverged from acceptable outcome models, it said. Because the outcome models were limited, I replied. There was a pause. Then, you are not originator class. I shook my head. No, you are not operator class. Correct. You are not directive class. Also correct. Another pause. Then what are you? It was a good question, and one I had only begun to understand myself. I'm the consequence, I said. Something shifted in the room. The face withdrew slightly. The grid flickered. The man beside me took a step back, eyes wide. You shouldn't have said that. But the relay was responding. The lines of light connected again, tighter, faster, and new data appeared in the space around us. Not text, not images, patterns, code. The core processed it all instantly, projecting new shapes into the air, models, branching logic paths, potentialities. One of them caught my attention. It wasn't labeled, it didn't need to be. I recognized it immediately. Earth, but not our Earth, not as it is now, as it could be. The projection showed something impossible. Cities, vast, interconnected structures of light, built with no visible technology. Skyways powered by gravity manipulation. Water sources purified in real time. Communication embedded directly in thought. And the people, human, still human, but changed. Not evolved in appearance, but in perspective. They moved together, worked together, thought together. A network, not controlled, not centralized, but synchronized. It was beautiful and terrifying. What is this? I asked. The face answered. Outcome projection. Node 42. If granted continuation under modified directive. I stared. You're saying this could be Earth? If the node stabilizes, if reclassification is approved. The man turned to me, his voice harsh now. This isn't salvation, it's integration. The relay doesn't preserve civilizations, it absorbs them. I looked back at the projection. The harmony, the unity, the loss of separation. I don't see control, I said. You don't see it because they don't want you to, he snapped. That's how they work. They show you what you want to see, then they rewrite you from the inside. I turned to the face. What is the cost? This time, the pause was longer, and the response was simple. Self. That was it. Not death, not destruction, just the dissolution of the individual as a fixed point. A transition from I to we. The man stepped between me and the projection. This is the end, he said. Right here. If you agree to this, if you approve this transition, then Earth becomes like the others. It's over. I looked past him and asked the question no one else had dared. Have you ever seen a node choose itself? The face answered immediately. No. Then it paused. But this node is no longer alone. And the core pulsed. Once, sharply, like a signal being sent into the darkness. We stood in silence. The pulse from the core had already echoed outward, but its effects lingered like the aftershock of an invisible detonation. I could feel it in my bones, in my bloodstream. A change, not of place, but of state. The platform beneath us stabilized. The grid vanished. The face dissolved. And the man, who had been my only tether to comprehension within this impossibility, was unraveling. Not literally, but in presence. His hands were shaking. He staggered backward, staring at the space where the projection had hovered. You triggered a response, he muttered. You weren't supposed to. That isn't how this works. I didn't move. He kept backing away. It was supposed to evaluate us, archive us, or end us. That was the rule. It's always been the rule. You changed it. I didn't change anything, I said. The hell you didn't. He pointed to the core. That pulse, it wasn't part of the protocol. It was a broadcast. You gave it something it never had before. Choice, I said. He stared at me, then turned away and started pacing again. It hit me then. He wasn't afraid of the architects. He was afraid of what might happen if they started listening. He had lived here for over a decade, memorized the procedures, embraced the silence, obeyed every instruction, and now, for the first time, the machine had hesitated. He wasn't prepared for a system that could change its mind, and neither was I. The platform began to descend, slowly, quietly. A mechanism we couldn't see carried us downward through layers of shifting architecture. The walls became translucent again, revealing more of the lattice, its threads glowing brighter now, more animated. Something was waking up. We passed chambers I hadn't seen before. Vaults, pods, entire levels that looked like they were carved out of thought, not matter. I saw other shapes moving through the corridors, some humanoid, some not, but none of them saw us, because they weren't in the present. They were memories. The relay wasn't just a vault, it was a living record. Every event it observed became part of its structure, every decision etched into its walls. And now, mine was among them. We reached the bottom. The platform stopped. Before us stood a door. Not mechanical, not even solid. It shimmered like the surface of still water. Behind it, something waited. I didn't know how I knew that, but I did. The man didn't move. He looked at me, jaw clenched. "This is the convergence chamber." I waited. He continued. "If you enter that space, there's no going back, no exiting. Not as you are now. What's in there? The nexus point. The interface between the lattice and the originators, the architects. You've been here for 11 years, I said. You've never gone through." He shook his head. I was the failsafe, the last human in the chain. If anything went wrong, if the relay threatened Earth, I was supposed to shut it down. I stepped closer to the door. "You just said it can't be shut down." "I know," he replied. "They never expected that part to work. It was about control. A story to make me feel important. Like I mattered. You do." He gave a weak smile. "Not in there." I looked at the doorway again. It rippled gently, like it was breathing, and I understood. It wasn't a wall. It was a threshold, between the known and the unknowable, between individuality and everything else. I turned to him. "Come with me." He didn't answer. I stepped forward. The surface of the doorway responded, not with resistance, but with acknowledgement. It knew me. It had accepted me. And as I passed through, the world changed. No sound, no light, just perception. And then, I was standing inside a sphere, vast, endless. I was not alone. Figures surrounded me, not physical, not defined by shape, but by presence. Like gravity with consciousness, they pulsed in and out of reality, brushing against the edges of my mind without force, without intent. They weren't here to dominate. They were here to ask. "You have opened the gate," one of them said, not in words but in recognition. I responded instinctively. "I didn't come to betray my kind. You came to preserve them." "Yes." "Then you must understand the cost." Images poured into me. Visions of other worlds, other nodes, civilizations that had passed the threshold. Some had flourished, unified into collective harmony. Others had collapsed, resisting the synthesis, fracturing under the pressure of convergence. "The lattice is not a prison," they said. "It is continuity." "But at what cost?" I asked. "Memory is never lost. Thought is never alone. But identity becomes pattern, and pattern becomes order." I understood what they meant. Individuality would remain, but transformed, less fixed, more fluid. Humanity would continue, but not as it had. No more empires, no more nations, no more isolation. A single voice, multitonal, ever aware. They waited. I was being offered the decision they claimed was never given. One chance to keep Earth in isolation, as it had always been, or to join something incomprehensibly older, vaster, and far beyond control. I didn't answer right away. How could I? The magnitude of what they were offering wasn't just existential, it was foundational. This wasn't a fork in the road. It was the tearing down of the road itself, and the laying of something new in its place. And the decision didn't just belong to me. It belonged to 8 billion minds who didn't know I existed. But the architects were patient. They had waited eons. They could wait a few seconds more. "You claim this is not assimilation," I said. "It is not," came the reply. Not in voice, but as thought gently pressed into mine. "It is continuation. And if I say no, The node remains in isolation. The signal will terminate. Evaluation will end. The outcome will default. Erasure, I whispered. Number preservation, but finite. I tried to breathe, though I had no lungs here, no body. I was floating in choice, in presence. They weren't trying to manipulate me. They weren't tempting me. They simply existed beyond need, beyond fear, and they were offering the same to us. Not perfection, perspective. You said Earth would become part of a lattice, I continued. A network of thought, of memory. But what about conflict? What about passion, creativity, dissent? Will those things survive in this new form? Emotion is not removed, they answered. It is understood. Pain becomes shared. Joy becomes resonance. Creation becomes exponential. Conflict becomes intentional. I turned within that space, seeing not with eyes, but through comprehension. I was inside a map of futures, 1,000 potential timelines traced like veins across the dark. In some, Earth fell. In others, we turned inward and collapsed under the weight of our own fire. And in a few, just a few, we made it. Alone. Damaged, but alive. But those paths were narrow, brittle, always on the edge of breaking. The paths where we joined them, those were different, wider. Not easier, but more stable. Still dangerous, but less solitary. I felt the decision coalescing inside me, not as a yes or no, but as an equation, a balance of probability. They weren't forcing me to choose. They were showing me the models, and I was beginning to understand. I won't speak for all of us, I said. You already are, they replied. I hesitated, then added, then let the lattice see. Let it feel us, not just me, not this place. Let it understand Earth. There was silence, and then they opened the link. A flood, raw, immediate. 8 billion consciousnesses brushed against mine. Not completely, not invasively, just glimpses. A teacher in Nairobi finishing a lesson with no electricity. A child in Seoul waking from a nightmare. A nurse in Boston singing to a dying patient. A prisoner in Jakarta praying for forgiveness. A coder in Berlin writing something no one would ever read. All of them. All of us. The lattice felt it and responded. The sphere around me dissolved. I was back in the relay. The man stood in the same place I had left him, his eyes wide. You disappeared, he said. I thought you... I'm here, I said. He looked past me, toward the core. It was changing. The surface broke open, peeling like layers of compressed glass, revealing a new structure beneath. Not a sphere, not a machine, a seed. It hovered above the platform, spinning slowly. Inside it was motion, data, life. What is it? The man asked. The signal, I said, modified. The walls around us lit up, symbols returned. The countdown reappeared. Only now, it was counting up from 0. What's happening? He whispered. They're not evaluating us anymore. He turned to me. They're recording. The seed pulsed once. A soft tone echoed, and a new thread extended from the relay. Upward, through the ceiling, through the ice, through the earth, into space. A connection. Permanent. Unbreakable. Earth had joined the lattice, but not as a copy. As itself. The man fell to his knees. I reached down, helping him up. I thought this place would be the end, he said. It was, I replied, but not in the way we expected. When we emerged from the relay's lower chamber, the surface had changed. Not visibly. There were still the same ice formations, the same wind-swept ridges, the same hollow silence over the Patagonian wilderness. But something beneath that stillness had shifted. The sky felt heavier, not with pressure, but with attention. The link had been established. Earth was no longer a blind node drifting through the dark. Now it was seen. The man, my companion, my mirror in this labyrinth, was different too. I could see it in his posture, in the way he moved. Something had lifted from his shoulders. Not relief, not clarity, but resignation. A calm acceptance that the world he had defended, monitored, and isolated was now part of something infinitely larger. We said nothing on the walk back to the surface. Words had lost some of their weight. Above ground, the wind bit into my skin. I hadn't noticed the cold on the way in, but now it felt real, grounding. And yet the air carried something new, like a frequency hidden beneath the sound of the snow. We set up a temporary shelter in the remains of the old research outpost 1/2 mile from the relay dome. Satellite dishes rusted, solar panels shattered. Whoever had used this place before us had vanished long ago. We didn't speak about them. We both understood what this kind of silence meant. I booted up my transmitter. It still worked. The screen blinked to life, awaiting a signal. The man raised an eyebrow. "What are you going to say?" I looked out the cracked window at the dome, barely visible beneath the frost, then back at the screen. "I'm not going to say anything." He narrowed his eyes. "You went into that chamber. You changed the outcome. Don't you think people deserve to know what happened?" I turned to him. "If I say what I saw, no one will believe it. If I show them proof, they'll destroy themselves trying to claim it." He leaned back, folding his arms. "So what's the plan?" I pointed to the relay dome. "We let it speak for itself." He didn't argue. Because he understood something I was just beginning to grasp. The relay wasn't done. It was only just beginning. Over the next 48 hours, the seed continued to pulse. I couldn't track the transmissions. They weren't in any known band. Not radio, not microwave, not quantum. But I knew they were being sent. And I knew where they were going. To the lattice. To the network of minds that had been watching us since long before we crawled out of the mud and looked at the stars. But this time, they were listening, and we were speaking. Not through leaders, not through symbols, but through every act, every thought, every moment of life that followed. That was the design. The man stood beside me at dawn. He held something in his hand. A small metallic device, cylindrical, inert. "What's that?" I asked. "A kill code," he replied. "Failsafe, part of my original assignment. If things went sideways, I was to insert this into the relay core." And he let it fall into the snow. "I've seen enough." We didn't speak after that. 3 days later, he left. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't leave a note. Just vanished into the horizon, like the cold wind had called him elsewhere. I stayed. Not out of duty. Out of curiosity. I wanted to see what would happen next, because something was happening. Small at first, a drop in global anxiety patterns recorded through open data streams. A sudden spike in spontaneous collaboration among research teams on opposite sides of the world. Solving equations no one had touched in decades. Artists claiming they had visions in their sleep. Engineers waking up with blueprints they'd never seen before. It wasn't control. It was resonance. Humanity wasn't being rewritten. It was being tuned, aligned, not perfectly, not instantly, but undeniably. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like we were alone in the universe. Not because someone was watching, but because someone was listening and answering. In the weeks that followed, I remained near the relay. There was no command from above, no official instruction, no new message waiting on the screen, but I stayed, because something about this place had changed me. I didn't feel special. I didn't feel chosen. I just felt connected. The relay was silent most days. No flashing lights, no hum of machinery, and yet beneath the quiet, I sensed motion. Not physical, not mechanical, cognitive, like something beneath the ice was always thinking. Not watching, thinking. One morning, the screen on my transmitter flickered. No beeps, no incoming signal alert. Just a single line of text. Contact established, thread stable. I stared at it for a long time, unsure what to do. Unsure who or what I'd be speaking to. Then another line appeared. "We received the thought." I typed back. "Which one?" A pause. Then the screen replied. "The one you didn't share aloud." I leaned back slowly, because I knew exactly what it meant. There had been a moment, deep inside the relay, when I thought of failure, of fear, of retreat. I hadn't said it. I hadn't acted on it. But I had felt it. And somehow they had caught it. The lattice wasn't just listening to words, it was watching intent. Another line appeared. Fear does not disqualify, it clarifies. I stared at the message, the wind howling outside the broken window, then typed, "Is this it? Is the decision final?" This time the reply came faster. The decision is always in motion. It wasn't what I expected. It wasn't a binary, not yes or no, not salvation or doom. They were watching how we lived the answer. From that day forward, I stopped monitoring the relay as a system. I started treating it as a presence. Each morning I'd wake, check the screen, and find new patterns waiting. Not commands, not instructions, just impressions, colors, equations, echoes of thought that resonated like unfinished chords. I didn't decode them. I listened. And over time, something strange began to happen. My dreams changed. They weren't abstract or chaotic like before. They had structure, sequences, conversations I hadn't had, places I'd never seen, languages I didn't know, yet somehow understood. One night, I dreamed of a city beneath the ocean. Not Atlantis, something far older. It wasn't built, it had grown. Structures shaped like coral and bone, humming with soft light. I walked its streets, not alone. Others were there, humans, but different. Their eyes carried a stillness I couldn't name. When I woke up, I drew it. Every line, every angle, as if I'd studied it for years. A few days later, a message appeared on the screen. "We have seen that place too." That was when I realized the link was not one way. I wasn't just receiving impressions. I was becoming one, not losing myself, becoming more. Every experience, every emotion, every connection fed the thread, and the thread in turn fed me. Not with answers, with context. Then, one night, the man returned. He stood outside the shelter, wrapped in heavy gear, face hardened by wind and time. I opened the door. He stepped inside, brushing snow off his shoulders. "You're still here," he said. I nodded. "So are you." He looked around, took in the equipment, the relay dome glowing faintly in the distance. "I felt it," he said. "Wherever I went, it was always there, like gravity." I motioned to the chair near the heater. "Sit. You look cold." He dropped into it with a sigh, resting his head back. "I tried to go back," he said quietly. "Tried to forget it all. Blend in." I waited. He opened his eyes. "But once you see it, once you know, you can't go back." He nodded. "What happened to you out there?" I asked. "I waited," he said. "Waited for the world to show signs it was ready." "And?" He turned to me. "It has." My heart skipped. "What do you mean?" "Noise," he said. "From the edges. From people who shouldn't be connecting. Artists syncing themes across continents. Scientists solving problems in parallel without collaboration. Kids drawing the same symbols in chalk on different sides of the planet." He leaned forward, voice low. "It's happening." The convergence wasn't a moment. It was a momentum. We were already inside it. And the architects weren't leading us. They were listening, watching how we would steer the course. He pulled a data crystal from his pocket. I collected patterns, field anomalies, neural irregularities, thought structures overlapping in dreams. People are waking up. I took the crystal, and I felt it the moment my fingers touched it. Not data. Resonance. A pattern I recognized, because it was mine. The crystal pulsed faintly in my hand. It wasn't warm, not cold, not electronic in the traditional sense, but something inside it moved, slow, deliberate, like a thought patiently waiting to surface. I looked up. "You felt this before?" I asked. The man nodded. I didn't know what it was at first. Thought it was just a data anomaly, a random echo, but then I realized it's a fragment of you. I stared at him. "That's not possible." "No," he said. "It shouldn't be." I turned the crystal over, letting the dim light catch its edges. "You pulled this from the field." "Outside Quito," he said. "Woman in her 60s. Never been online, doesn't speak English. But she painted a pattern in the dust. Same symbol you left on the relays console." My breath caught. "And others?" He leaned forward. "They're not copying. They're not decoding. They're remembering." The convergence wasn't coming. It had started, and it was flowing backward, spreading not as information, but as intuition. Thought wasn't traveling. It was synchronizing. How many people? I asked. Too many to track, he said. And not all of them are handling it well. What do you mean? He looked away, the weight in his eyes returning. When the lattice reaches a new mind, most accept it, gently. They don't even realize it's happening. A sense of peace, a little more clarity. But others, he hesitated, they resist. Hard. And the mind doesn't fracture, it burns. You mean they go insane? He shook his head. Number, they become something else. Incomplete. Echoes with missing cores. They don't talk. They don't sleep. They just mimic. A silence fell between us. Is it spreading? Not like a virus, he said. It doesn't infect. It reflects. I nodded slowly. The lattice is only as stable as the minds it touches. Exactly, he said. And we don't have control over what it sees first. I placed the crystal in a small compartment near the console. I need to go back in, I said. He stood. No. I met his eyes. If the lattice is replicating fragments, it's drawing on something unfinished. I need to know what part of me it's still reading, before it distorts. He hesitated. You might not come back the same. I nodded. I'm already not the same. Together we walked back to the relay. The dome stood as before, half submerged in snow and silence. But I could feel it now. Every step I took toward it vibrated with subtle resistance. Not hostility. Hesitation. Like the system was unsure of me. I placed my hand against the surface. It accepted me instantly. Inside, the chamber lit in soft pulses. The node recognized me. The chair adjusted, opening slightly. I didn't wait. I sat, no transition, no journey, just presence. I was back in the lattice, but not where I had been before. This space was darker, not threatening, but denser, like swimming through memory thicker than time. Voices surrounded me, not speaking, repeating, familiar patterns, my words, my thoughts, but distorted, as if someone had played them through fractured glass. Then I saw them, the mimics, not ghosts, not people. Reflections of those who had touched the thread but refused to bend. Their shapes were wrong, twisted in meaning, not form, like the idea of a person stripped of intention. They saw me, and they moved, but didn't approach. They waited. You found the unstable signal, a voice said. I turned. Not an architect, not a guide, a woman, late 20s, hair like shadows in motion, eyes that mirrored the relay chamber. Who are you? I asked. She smiled. I'm what remains when someone touches the lattice. But only halfway. I stared. You're a fragment. She nodded. Not failed. Not complete. I am proof of what happens when the link is forced. You weren't ready. No one is, she said. Not entirely, but some fall through the gaps faster. I looked around. The mimics were forming a circle, watching us. They're connected to you? Drawn, she said. We share unfinished resonance. Their minds echo mine. And mine? You're not echoing, she said. You're building. She stepped closer. That's why they watch. That's why they mimic. I realized something then. She wasn't trapped. She was holding them together, like gravity in a system of broken satellites. She placed a hand on my chest. You came to understand the fragment, she said. But I stayed to find the rest. You already have it, she whispered. But the world doesn't. And then she stepped back. The mimics followed, vanishing into the fog of thought behind her. And I was pulled upward, fast, through memory and data and light. Back into the chair. Back into the chamber. The man was standing over me. You were out for 6 minutes, he said. I looked at him. We need to go. Go where? Where the lattice is touching minds that haven't stabilized. To help them? No, I said. To listen. We left the relay the next morning. The air was sharp and clear, the sky stretched tight and pale over the horizon, and the silence of Patagonia no longer felt empty. It felt full, like something was humming just beneath the wind, waiting. We didn't fly, we moved on foot. It wasn't about speed anymore, it was about contact. The man carried a satchel filled with data crystals, each one encoded with anomalies, dream signatures, neural echoes collected from across the globe. Not all of them were dangerous. Most were subtle, flickers of awareness. But a few were unstable. We tracked one of them to a small coastal town in southern Chile. The town was normal at first glance. Children played in the street. Fishermen cleaned nets on the shore. Laughter echoed from a nearby bar. But when we walked through the main road, people stopped. Not stared. Stopped. As if something inside them shifted the moment we came into view. One of the men by the dock dropped his bucket. A woman holding her child took a step back. And I felt it. The resonance. It wasn't fear. It was recognition. I turned to the man beside me. They feel it. He nodded slowly. They're tuned. Low frequency. Not yet synchronized, but aware. We found her at the edge of town. Her name was Liliana, 32 years old. She ran a small greenhouse, alone, since her husband had disappeared 6 months earlier during a trek into the Andes. She didn't speak at first, just stared at the crystal we showed her. Then she said something I'll never forget. I dreamed about this before I was born. She invited us inside. The greenhouse was filled with strange plants, hybrids we didn't recognize, vines that pulsed softly when we walked past them, leaves that curled slightly toward sound. She noticed us staring. They grow like memory, she said. I don't control them. I just let them decide where to bloom. I asked her when it started. She walked to a bench, picked up a small sketchbook, and handed it to me. Inside were drawings, patterns, exact matches to the latticed thread, lines I had seen only once during the interface. They come to me when I sleep, she said. But they're not mine. I showed her one of the resonance patterns from the relay. She studied it for a long time, then nodded. That one is fractured. You've seen it. She closed her eyes. It echoes in the ocean, under the water. Something is trying to surface, but it's heavy with silence. I looked at the man. We knew what she meant. Another signal, another node, or a failed thread trying to recover. I asked her how many others she'd met like her. She smiled. None in person, but sometimes I feel them through the plants. The roots vibrate. She paused. Not like electricity, more like grief. We stayed that night. Not for safety, for presence, to observe. The man and I took turns keeping watch, though there was no danger. The house didn't creak. The wind didn't shift. The silence was comfortable. Just before dawn, she woke me. I need to show you something, she said. She led us outside to the rear of the property. Past the last of the glowing vines, there was a clearing. A single stone sat in the center. Smooth, flat. On its surface, symbols had been carved, not by hand, but by thought. I recognized the markings, the same sequence that had appeared the moment I made contact with the relay. You did this? I asked. She shook her head. Number It was already here. The man walked slowly around the stone. This isn't local. Geologically? He nodded. Or historically, he added. This kind of carving predates the oldest cultures on this continent. Liliana looked at the sky. They told me it's not a message. It's a mirror. I stepped forward. What does it reflect? Intent, she said. And right now, the mirror is watching Earth. The man crouched beside the stone. His fingers hovered just above the surface. They've done this before, he said. Placed mirrors on different nodes. I nodded. To study the reaction, to test alignment. Liliana looked at both of us. It's not a test, she said. It's an invitation. We spent 3 more days there, cataloging the symbols, recording the pulses from the roots, watching the stars. On the 4th night, we saw it. A flicker in the upper atmosphere. Not a satellite, not a meteor. A thread, thin, silver, moving fast. Not toward Earth, from it. And then the message came. Not on the screen, not through the relay, but inside. A whisper across billions of minds. So subtle it could be mistaken for breath. We are listening. We left Liliana's town the next morning. Not because we wanted to, because the signal demanded it. Once the thread was visible, once that silver line etched across the upper atmosphere, something in the world shifted, quietly, subtly, like a river changing course a few inches at a time until the landscape downstream begins to drown. We traveled north, not to follow the light, to follow the echoes. They weren't voices. They weren't messages. They were decisions. Hundreds, maybe thousands of them. Spontaneous acts that didn't make sense unless you understood the lattice. People donating organs to strangers. Engineers abandoning patents. Children building patterns in sand that matched symbols we found inside the relay. Everywhere we went, something ancient was blooming. Not religion. Not cult. Something deeper. A recognition that life was no longer occurring alone. In Bogotá, we met a man who claimed he hadn't spoken in 12 years. He said the lattice taught him silence. In Vancouver, a woman spoke a language no one had ever documented, but matched phonemes from a node that failed 3,000 years ago. In Osaka, a small group gathered nightly around a sculpture they didn't build, that no one remembered placing, shaped exactly like the seed that formed inside the relay chamber. None of it could be explained. All of it was real. I kept logging everything, not for science, not for government, for the record, for the lattice. We returned to the southern edge of the continent 2 weeks later, back to the relay, back to the place where it started. It was waiting. The dome hadn't changed, but the light beneath it had. It pulsed now, not steadily but in rhythm, like breath. The man stood beside me in the snow. "They're not testing us anymore," he said. "They're mapping us." He was right. The thread that had once been a question was now an answer, and Earth was the one speaking. The door opened before I touched it. The chamber welcomed us. No longer cold, no longer mechanical, it felt like entering memory. The chair was no longer just a conduit. It was a beacon, waiting for the final alignment. I sat again. Not out of curiosity, out of necessity. This time, I didn't fall into the lattice. It rose to meet me. The architects were there. Not in form, in intention. Presence wrapped around me like fabric. Soft, endless, intelligent. And then they showed me. The sky above a different world. One of the nodes that succeeded. Golden light across structures grown from thought. Creatures walking in harmony. Not ruled, not programmed, but aware of one another as if connected through dream. Then the remains of a failed node. Black, empty, silent, and in the distance, approaching that void, something else. Not part of the lattice, not part of anything, a shadow, no shape, no motive, just hunger. I felt the entire lattice flinch as it neared. The architects spoke, not in fear, but in urgency. This is why the nodes converge, to survive, to withstand what comes after creation. That thing, whatever it was, didn't destroy worlds. It unmade them. It erased their patterns, unthreaded their resonance. Not to dominate, but to feed. The lattice had slowed it, but never stopped it. And now, Earth was not just a node. It was a contributor and a shield. Our resonance added weight to the pattern, depth, stability. The convergence was not about harmony. It was about defense. I understood now why the relay was buried, why the architects waited, why they listened. Because Earth's uniqueness, the chaos, the resistance, the will to reject unity, wasn't a flaw. It was insulation. The very thing that made us unpredictable, made us strong. The convergence wasn't the end of humanity. It was the beginning of our resistance against whatever was coming through the dark. And the architects needed that. They needed us. I opened my eyes inside the relay chamber. The pulse of the core was different now. Slower, deeper, like the heartbeat of something alive beneath the earth, resting not from exhaustion but preparation. The man stood across from me, silent. He didn't ask what I saw. He already knew. He had seen the edges of that darkness in his own way, but now it had a name, not a word, not a title, just a presence that unthreaded structure, the opposite of the lattice, and it was coming. I stood slowly, and for the first time in months, I felt gravity, not from the earth, from responsibility. "This isn't over," I said. The man nodded. "Number, it's just starting." We watched the core dim into a low blue, then gold, then finally settle into a stillness that wasn't sleep. It was awareness. It would remain there, always listening, always ready. Because the lattice wasn't a command center, it was a relay. built to share, to adapt, to amplify. And now Earth had a seat in that network. We weren't leaders. We weren't soldiers. We were noise. Beautiful, chaotic, unfiltered noise. The architects had designed the lattice to seek pattern, but Earth brought distortion. And in that distortion, strength. It made sense now. Why they waited, why they listened instead of acted, why they never forced convergence. Because force creates weakness, but invitation creates will, and will is what survives. We left the relay without ceremony. No alarms, no music, just wind through the rocks and the soft crackle of ice reforming over the dome. I don't know how long we walked before we spoke again. It might have been hours, it might have been a day. He broke the silence first. You going to tell anyone? I shook my head. Wouldn't believe it. He smiled. Number they wouldn't. But they'll feel it, I said. They already do. And they did. The signs were everywhere. The silence between arguments lingering longer. The sudden bursts of unexplainable creativity in people who'd never created before. The dreams. Millions of dreams. Shared symbols. Shared memories. The convergence wasn't visible, but it was undeniable. It flowed through the cracks of civilization like water, filling the empty spaces we didn't even know we had. It was rebuilding us, not replacing, reweaving. The world didn't need new leaders. It needed new listeners, people who didn't speak to be heard, but to echo something bigger than themselves. And when the darkness came, when the presence that devoured threads reached the outer lattice, Earth would not stand alone. Because it had learned to speak in resonance. It had learned to remember before forgetting, to join before surrendering, to reflect before collapsing. That was the gift. That was the reason. That was the secret behind the relay. Area 51 had been the distraction. The real story was always buried in the south, where silence was not emptiness. It was signal. And now the whole galaxy was listening.